Hello. So it's finally time to actually start filling up all those HTML templates that we have created in the previous lectures. And we are going to start off with the base HTML template since that's the one we are going to be using by extending it to all the other templates. And we will also be setting up some of the CSS and JavaScript files. So we are going to making throughout the future lectures. Let's get started by uh, going to the editor, and I will also be showing you the resources in the browser. So we'll kind of hop back and forth between those. Let's get started. Okay. And here I am at the editor and I have opened up the base HTML file. So far we don't really have anything in it. We just have this doc type HTML and I have gone ahead and added load static files. That way I can reference things such as the blog CSS file we did using template tagging. So I can say that static template tag. So coming back to base HTML, we are going to add some stuff to this. So the things we need to add after adding a title is bootstrap salt type that is in as common. So I want to add in bootstrap. Okay, I also want to add in this medium style editor, and that's going to be the thing that allows us to kind of mimic medium.com editing. And we'll show you what that means in just a second. We also want to have some custom CSS and then probably some Google fonts as well. So we'll grab those as well. And then the other thing that I want is over here in the body I will probably want a, nav bar eventually. So we will be adding that in this lecture, and then this is going to be the base HTML, and we'll probably also have some content. Okay, so I will have some sort of body block here, or I believe we called it the content block. So we'll call it content block. So let's save that and let's come back up here and show you the resources and how to grab everything. So for Bootstrap, we have done this a bunch of times before, but just come over here to get a Bootstrap and then I am going to grab the CDNS. So I will copy this and then I am going to paste it here. And here we can see the latest minified course and also an optional themes is what I have copied and pasted. Those are the only two lines we need, and let me collapse this directory tree to give myself a little more room. Now the next thing we are going to add in is the medium style editor. So in case you are not familiar with medium.com, let me show you what that looks like. And then we will explore some GitHub libraries that are open source for us to use to mimic this. So I'm going to hop over to my browser here and close this get bootstrap. And here we can see I am at GitHub page. And if you go to all the way to the top, you can and you can see this is actually a library that has a ton of commits. Uh, so it's actually updated pretty recently as far as this filming, at least a month ago it was updated. And if you keep scrolling down you will see that it support most major browsers. But to actually get an understanding of what this is, I'm going to go to medium.com to kind of show you. So if you go to medium.com right now, so I'm logged in so I can see particular articles. But medium.com is basically where anyone can just write an article or blog, and everything has the same style and formatting. So if we click on one of these articles such as this one, how machines make sense of big data, obviously you can tell that I follow a lot of data science and technology articles. You will click on it and it looks something like this, and every article blog on medium.com basically has the same look and feel. You have images and then you have this text editor and you have kind of these wide margins. So it looks kind of almost like a blog post. And if you want to write your own story, you click here on write a story after you are logged in, and then you have the sort of editor. So you will say some stuff here, and then you can highlight this, and it gives you the option to either make it bold, make it italic, header one, long headings two, or you can even put a link here and then say I don't know google.com etc., and you can see it's underlined and now it's a link. So that's the kind of thing we want to mimic in our own blog post. So if we come over here after some searching, I was able to discover that a lot of people wanted this sort of functionality, and it's already here for a clone for us to use. And if you scroll all the way down, you want to make sure that whenever you are working with open source files that you found online, that there is some sort of license agreement. So we check on the license, make sure that we have permission to actually use this. And I'm just using this for educational purposes. So you can see that this is copyright, but there is also a particular license. So there is permission free of charge to any person obtaining a copy of this software to deal in the software without any sort of restrictions. And then it's subject to the following condition. Usually the conditions are for you just to source and attribute who you actually got this from. So here is the actual information here on this license. So we are just doing this for educational purposes, but whenever you are doing something in production, you should always make sure that you have the rights to this software. Obviously, when things are hosted on GitHub, then they are open source. Things can get a little confusing. So if you are ever have any doubt, feel free to just message the uh, directly to the person. And coming back to the actual, let's go back here. Coming back to the actual Medium editor homepage here on this GitHub, we can see that if you scroll down, it's essentially a JavaScript library that mimics exactly what the Medium.com was doing. It C has modern browser support, which is good, and it shows you some basic demos on basic usage. So what we are going to be doing is using this for text area, and eventually if you click on the demo, you will find this demo. So this is under Medium editor demo text area HTML, and you can see that after you have imported and linked everything, the JavaScript and the CSS, you just have to create this script here to create a new editor object. And you also have to make sure that this has class this editable medium editor text area, which we actually did back when we were creating that widget dictionary attribute in the forms classes. And then coming back here, we can see that there is various ways to actually add this in as a file in our project. And there is a service called JS Deliver, which kind of acts like an external CDN. So if you don't actually want to download everything and link it up manually, you can just copy and paste these two right here. So one is the JavaScript file, and then one is the CSS link file. So I'm going to do that. The other option is if you are having trouble getting this CDNS to work, then just do the manual installation, which you just scroll down here. And then you click down where it says latest releases, and it will take you to the latest release page, and then I will say okay, latest release 5.23.0. And then we can do is find out all the information about that, and then just download the source code itself, and then just use the linking which we already learned about HTML to link the JavaScript and CSS files. So I will come back here to my editor, and I am going to copy and paste that medium style editor. So there is only two things. There is the JavaScript, and then there is this CSS. So coming back down here, those are the two links I'm going to need to actually implement the medium style editing. And later on we'll see the template tags. I had to set up that widget class, and then also call that script that we kind of just talked about. Then finally, for some custom CSS, make sure that any custom CSS goes after all these other CSS calls. and I'm going to link it here to this blog, that CSS. So luckily I have already inputted load static files, meaning I can just say add a link here. It's a style sheet, and then for my reference I'm going to use a static template tagging which we have seen before, and just say static, and then call something like css blocked css, because if I look at the directory, that's where it is. We have a static css log, that css, and right now our blog, that css is empty for that blog. And if you remember back to what the blog actually looks like, we have those sort of color changes that the text does, and I will show you how I discovered that. So what's really fun website to check out, which we probably mentioned the very beginning of the course as way to share your code for front end stuff, is using this CodePen. So that's codepen.io, and you can come here and there is lots of pens, and essentially there is just really nice fun font, that is a nice front end. So using these three front end technologies, that's HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and this is powerful. So you can do a lot of CSS that you would think would be limited to JavaScript. So what I was doing, I was just messaging around on CodePen. I kind of wanted to add some nice CSS to this, maybe something that was a little fun for the blog project. So eventually, after searching these, if you find something that interests you, for instance, maybe you wanted, well, not the box solution, that's a little too crazy. So let's say you wanted to have this little guy, this rainbow preloader. So you click on this and you will notice that it has notes that it's only supported in comma. But if you wanted to add something like this to your site, that you could do is just copy this CSS and then copy the HTML, which is basically an example of how to use the CSS. And that would be an easy way to have that on your site. So what I ended up doing is I discovered this little loading. So it's a simple loader, and then we can click on it. And what it does is the background changes, and I want it to, instead of have the entire background changes, I would have the letters themselves change. And I didn't really care too much about these three dots that are loading. So basically what I want to grab is just the color changing, and this was actually all done with CSS. So I'm going to copy and paste this, and since we are using this for educational purposes, we don't have to worry too much about the license. But in case you wanted to use something like this in production, it's always a good idea to contact the creator and make sure that's okay with them. So obviously they are hosting this all open source, and there is no real license agreement here, but you should always check and make sure. So all you have to do is copy this and note the class, and it is the class loader, and we are going to be kind of calling that on everything later on. So I'm going to come back here after copy and paste that, and I'm just going to put that into our own block CSS. So I will paste that here and then scroll back up, and I don't actually need the B1, so that B2, B3, B1, B2, and B3 we do not need. So that's for these three little loading bars. What I really want and I am concerned with this, just this loader and then these keyframes. So I'm going to get rid of these B1, B2, B3 classes, and scroll all the way down, and then kind of get rid of them just to simplify my script a little bit. Then what I want to do is the last thing, I don't want to change the background. I just wanted to change the color. So we will be exploring this later on as we actually implement this. Okay. So there is my loader, and we actually don't need this left, right, top either. I don't need this position fix, kind of simplifying this. These are the three things I only really care about. The few rotate. So where it is actually coming from the linear gradient of the color and then the animation. So I will save this and then we also see we have this one call which we can leave if we wanted to, but I am actually just going to get rid of it since we don't really need a heading one. So that was, if you look over here, this loading of some how it's also changing. I don't really want that, so I am just going to say save it. So the main things I care about are loader and then keyframes. If you keep the other stuff in, you may get some different behavior than that what we have seen in the blog so far. So after we have set up our blog, that CSS file with that extra code, the last thing we have to do is set up Google Fonts. So coming back to the browser, I have Google Fonts or googlefonts.com, that's google.com, and I am going to search for the two fonts I used. So you have a lot of flexibility over which ones you want to use. I use one called Rauso. One look kind of interesting to me, and then I also use one of my favorite fonts, this Loops Monistrat, and then we are going to add that as well. Two families are selected, so I am going to open that up and then copy and paste the link here. So I am going to copy that and insert that into fonts, and now I have the style sheets. Okay, perfect. And now we are going to do is set up our navbar. So we'll come down here and we are going to set up our navbar. So there is our nav, and let's set up the class calls, and I would not expect you to memorize these. So I basically was just looking at the Bootstrap documentation, and in fact, a lot of this was kind of just like copy and paste from Bootstrap documentation. So we use navbar space, navbar dash default, and then I am going to create another class called tag fonts, which is going to allow me, if I go to blog about CSS, I am going to add that in. Now that's going to allow me to actually edit the fonts of the actual navbar. So let's add that in here. I'm going to say the font family of that is what? Rusho 1. That was the font from Google that we just got. And then it's called, it also going to be sans serif. Then I will set the font size to be, let's just say 1.5 centimeter. And then of course, you have a lot of way if however you want to do this. And I'm going to give a little bit more margin here. So I will save that. So come back to base.html. So that's my tag font. And then the other thing I want is custom navbar. So a custom navbar is a class that I am going to be using in case I ever want to customize anything else on my navbar. I will leave it blank for now in the blog, that blog.css. I don't believe we actually ever really need it or use it, but sometimes a good idea to just add in another class while you are building up the base HTML template in case you ever want to mess don't want to mess around with that. So we'll save that, and then we are going to have a div here, and we are just going to give this a container div. That way anything we put in the nav bar will actually be contained. So we are going to have quite a few links here. First one is going to be, in fact, it's give it a class, and first one's going to be our brand. So we'll call this a navbar, the brand. And there is something else you can add in here. So we'll add another class, big brand, and that way we can link that to our CSS file if necessary. And big brand is just something to make it a little bigger. So I'm going to come over here and add in. big brands class, and let's just have this font size of 1.5 m. That way it looks a little larger than the rest of the text. So if you notice back when we were running the blog project, the brand font size, so a little bit larger than the rest of it. So that's what the big brand is for. And then continuing on with this, what I want to do is set up the link. So if you go to if you click on the brand, that should take you back to the home page. I remember the homepage for us is the actual post list. So we'll say URL post list, and let's call this something like my blog. Okay. So in fact, I'm going to expand this so we don't really need to reference the browser anymore and to add another list item. And you can kind of fast forward for this if you don't want to watch me do all this, just as a heads up. And then we want an about page either about yourself or the company, and we'll just have this say about. Okay, so you can copy and paste all these links to make sure you get the spelling correct. And then let's have two references. So we will have reference, an outside reference, and inside reference, that is to github.com. Maybe you are using this for your own portfolio site or your company's GitHub page. We will have something like that, and then let's have another one too. I don't know, LinkedIn, and we'll have the say LinkedIn clips, and let's put this all in an unordered list. So unordered list here, and this will be in their class. No, no. This is an unordered list, and class will be the name class. Nav bar, nav. And let's grab all these list items and put them into this unordered list. Let's copy it. Okay. So now we have to make sure that if the user is logged into the website, they see those other options. And those other options were creating a new post draft and then I logging out and something that says something like welcome user or welcome Joes, etc. So in order to do that, I'm going to add in another unordered list, and I'm going to also give this a class and we'll say navbar. So actually navbar, this dash dash, right? So everything right aligned as far as the login information, and here is we are going to add in some template tagging for some logic. So we'll add an if statement, and we'll say if the user is underscore authenticated, which comes from our imports of the auth library in Django. And whenever you have an if, you always got to make sure you have an and. So if so we will have that as well. What kind of leave this towards the bottom? So if the user is authenticated, that are we going to do? Well, we should have a list then, right? And that list item. So let's just give it a anchor tag, and the anchor tag is going to be URL template, and the URL template is going to say link to post new, and we'll have it say new post. So I am going to copy and paste this because I want three more really similar things. So, so I want instead of post you to go to your draft page. So that is the post draft list, and instead of saying new post, we'll just have it say drafts. So those are the unpublished blog posts. Okay, and then we also want some sort of log out button. So have log out. Then this will just say log out. And then finally, after all that, I want one more of these, which is a little simpler, that just says it's actually, so it's not even going to have a link. It's just going to say welcome. It will say welcome and we'll inject our name. So that's going to be usernames and save that. Now, if you have an if statement, you probably are just going to have all statement in order for this to all work correctly. So if you don't have any of that, what is the right bar going to look like? So as we'll have a list item and got tag give, and it's a link that says login, which makes sense. So if you are not logged in, you are going to want to log in, and we'll say give this template tag of URL login, and let's give this a class so it aligns, right? Nav and navbar class. That's it. And if you can see here, I believe it should fall under the unordered list class anyways, but just because I am a little paranoid, I will add it to that particular item as well. And let's scroll over here. And what we could do is just have something that says login, but instead we'll have a grip icon, which is essentially that little icon. And these are free icons that come with Bootstrap. And in order to use them, you just use the span and then give the span a class, and the class name just match up with the actual icon you want to use. So in our case, it's this glyph icon, and then significant dash user, and that's that little kind of Facebook looking face, and that's it. That's all right. So that should be it for our neighbor. So you can see here, if we kind of review what we did, we and then everything to the right if the user is authenticated. So we have these three links: new post draft, logout if they are not authenticated else. When we are just going to have go to the login page and it's the picture of someone, it's not even some text. Now outside of the navbar, we are going to do is set up our actual content. So let's do that. Let's put all the content inside some sort of div. Now we can say have a class called content and then have another class called container in case we ever want to use it. And if we are interested in collapsing things, like if it is on a mobile display, this is where you could start adding in things like rows. So we don't really worry about this too much since we don't intend for people to really read our blog post on a mobile. But you would just have the rows in here, and then you can start saying, well, this class is going to be something like call medium 8, and then maybe you have another class for the blog post that we can link it up to any CSS that you want to affect. But eventually, after you identify your divs, what you are going to want is the actual blog itself. So it's going to be blog and then contents or body blog, whatever you want to call it. And then we will have end block here. So basically, you can add in a bunch of divs here that refers to the Bootstrap ability to actually collapse things. correctly according to whatever the grid system you worked out with. So that is it for the base HTML class. It was a lot of typing, but it's definitely going to save us some time when we actually work with other template. And that was hopefully a good enough explanation of where we got this medium style editor from, as well as the Google Fonts also, and as well as the custom CSS. If you go down here for the color changing, and the key thing here to note is that we are going to using the loader class at the very end. So we got everything done here. Okay, so make sure you copy and paste this from the notes, this thing. And if you have any doubt, you can contact me. Thank you for watching this lecture, and let's meet in another.